Welcome to the UnLearn Show, where we talk about breaking bad habits with a purpose. Our guest today is Jake. Jake, thank you so much for being a part of the show, and welcome.
Thank you guys for having me.
So, Jake, we like to ask our guests a question at the very beginning. What is one thing that people should know about you that either they don't know or that you'd like to share? And it can be personal, it can be about your professional life. The floor is all yours.
Okay. Oh boy. Fun fact, I've met over 15 celebrities and been on TV a couple times. That's a fun fact.
Which celebrity did you meet? Did you fanboy over any of the celebrities you met?
Yeah, Tyra Banks. When I was in high school, I told her I loved her and she waved at me and said thank you. She didn't say she loved me back, so whatever. She said thank you though. And then who was the other one? Well, I met Tony Hawk. I was on Nickelodeon with Tony Hawk, actually. That was pretty cool. So I stood behind him on this Nickelodeon. It was like a spin the bottle thing. So they'd spin a bottle and ask questions like in between commercials. And so I was standing behind him. I was 14. And there was another guy named Ryan Sheckler. I don't know if I was into skateboarding a little bit at that time. So he was coming up as a skateboarder. And yeah, I just stood behind him and they filmed for like 3 hours. And I got to see like all the dressing rooms of like Drake and Josh and all those like old school Nickelodeon shows growing up. And yeah, pretty cool.
Right on. So one of the things we always like to kind of dive in with is, what would you say is something that you've had to unlearn, personal or professional, that you've kind of had to unlearn and overcome to get to where you are today in your life?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Jake Melton can't control everything. I want control over everything. I've always been that way. And usually I take charge in groups. Usually I like to take my life where I want it to go. And as time has gone on, obviously I've learned it's very much opposite of that. And, there's things I can take control on and ways I can guide my life, but ultimately there's so many things that are out of my hands. And I've been somebody that's stressed about a lot of things in life. And growing up, I was okay until I got into high school, and then I became more of a worrywart as my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness at 14. So starting high school, I was already kind of thrown into life isn't going to be exactly what you want it to be, Jake. And that was kind of a reality check for me, because up until that point, everything was awesome. Like I was doing everything I wanted to do. Life was going to be perfect. And yeah, it turned out to be quite different than that. So that was one thing. And it took years, and I'm still doing it. Even though it's been over 15 years, I'm still having to understand that I'm not in control of many things. And I just need to let some things go and happen the way they're supposed to happen.
I feel like that's been a common theme in everyone that we've been chatting with, is like this idea of control, right? We all kind of like want to exert that. And we know that we are in control of nothing except for ourselves and our actions. But in those moments when life like just slaps you in the face and reminds you that you're not in control, how do you react? What's your process?
You know what? Right now, honestly, I go to my wife. She brings me to reality a little bit and helps me realize, well, number one, she helps me calm down, but she also helps me realize that, Jake, if you take a look back at life, even though some things turned out differently and some things were, if they were in my control, I would have chosen a different outcome, but things always worked out, or things always ended up being okay in the fact that we're still here, we have what we need, and we're moving forward somehow. So I always go to her. I mean, and as strong as I want to be, She's the one that really pulls me to and puts me on that level I need to be on to move forward.
Just a follow up to that, what's the most recent thing that's happened that's reminded you that you're not in control?
Let's see. Well, this is such a small thing, but this is the first thing that comes to my mind. Like, I went out of town to speak at a conference in Vegas 2 weeks ago, and when I left, my wife got sick. My Dean, my 2-year-old, got hand, foot, and mouth. My daughter, 4-year-old, got sick, and so like I'm not here to help with anything. And a couple things like payments didn't go through on something that was supposed to go through on because we used the wrong card. And so all these things, like I'm there and I'm busy, I'm trying to do this, then all these things are just coming in and happening. And it was at that time I was extremely stressed, obviously, about that, especially being somewhere where I couldn't really do much. And again, had to call my wife, and she's like, we'll figure it out. It'll be okay. We'll call them. And she has to do all the phone calls when things go wrong because I get too emotional and upset about it, and I never get what we want. But when she does it, things always work out okay. So I had to leave the control out of my hands and just kind of let things happen and work themselves out, and they did. So
has it seemed to, like, you fairly recently, if I'm correct, like launched your own thing fairly recently, has that seemed to have made it worse? Like the fact that you have your own business and your own things going on, which obviously you want to control, right? But a lot, that's when things can go south pretty fast. So has that like made it worse? Have you learned how to
that's
do
it's
that?
funny. Jake laughed because Jake and I spent a lot of time together, and he knows what's going on and what has happened over the last year. But yeah, it has made things worse. But it's made a lot of things better too. When I was in the corporate world, I always felt restricted as far as what I was able to do, what my potential was in the workplace. And, even working with teams, I was always the person to get things done before they were even due, and working with other people, it was just very different that way. And so I always wanted to own my own company because I wanted to be in control and have whatever responsibility and ambition and goals I wanted, and it was all up to me. But at the same time, obviously, starting your own thing, it's okay, well, if I stop doing what I'm doing right now, no money's going to come in. This isn't something that I can miss one day of work because I'm sick, and and it's all up to you. Everything coming in is up to you. It's up to you to figure out how to get insurance for your family. It's up to you to figure out how to reach out to clients. It's up to you to figure out your branding and your marketing. And it's up to you to spend as much time as you need reaching out to people. So it's a lot of responsibility, which obviously brings its own stresses and the financial responsibility there and insecurity that you have. So I would say those are some of the biggest things this year that added to that. But at the same time, me not having to report to anybody has just changed my life. Like, I don't have to clock in and clock out. I don't have to send emails to people with a review of what I accomplished during the day, or I don't have to call somebody if I have a headache and tell them that I'm not going to make it in, or I have a migraine, I can't make it to work. That I don't have to worry about that. So for me, that was one of those opportunity costs, that to be able to have that freedom, but also having to, have a little bit of that financial insecurity and stuff. It was worth that trade-off for me. Now, ask my wife, I'm not sure, but for me, it was.
I love how you talk about your like amazingly strong relationship with your wife. And it's no surprise, right, that entrepreneurship and just being a professional and reaching for success is freaking stressful. It's so stressful. So what are your top secrets to managing that stress and keeping your relationship with your wife so incredibly strong? We all want to hear it.
Well, let me think about it. Man, it is extremely stressful, and entrepreneurship, It's not for the faint of heart. And there's definitely, I mean, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And even though I thought it was hard working for other people and life seemed to suck then, and I hated my managers and coworkers, whatever, doing this, as far as like exertion of energy and just mental everything, this has definitely been harder. But something I wasn't doing at the beginning that I'm trying to do now was balance my time. So I was doing the stereotypical entrepreneur. You're working 15-hour plus days, and you're just always, when you're sitting there at dinner, you're sitting there in your bed at night, you're always working. And for me, it came to a point where my wife and kids were like, "Where are you? Like, you're here, but you're not here." And for me, I was like, well, I'm an entrepreneur. This is my life. This is my business. Get used to it. This is, at least, I'm not in the office. I'm here. I'm right here. So that's fine. That's better. But, as I've kind of taken a step back and tried to see when I actually am sitting there and my kids are there and they're wanting to play with me, or sitting there at night with my wife, and that's like the only time we have alone, quiet, to do whatever, like, and I'm on my phone working, those are things that could wait. And so I've tried to, again, balance my time and make quality time where it's appropriate, and really relish in that time, because that's the time I regain my energy. That's the time I can refocus. That's the time I can feel the most support, because entrepreneurship is lonely. And, when you have a spouse, or you have a partner, or you have a child, or anybody alongside with you, they're the ones that are there day and night, every second of every day. They're available, and they are there to help support you. So anyways, that for me, that's what it was. It was just focusing on the right things at the right time.
So a quick follow-up question to that is, I think all of us here are parents and we have serious relationships going on. And how do you stay present? How do you refocus and realize the fact that, this can wait, even though you have that controlling mindset in the back there saying, I gotta get this done. I got to get this done. How do you balance that and refocus in on what's most important, which are your kids and your wife?
So it was interesting before we even hopped on this call. I was thinking about, like, if we were going to go into something, and this kind of popped into my head about something I wanted to share, and that actually goes in with this question that you asked. So I told you when I was 14, my dad got sick, and I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So growing up, and at 14, finding out your dad only had maybe 6 to 7 years to live, they weren't exactly sure. We basically lived in the hospital for 3-4 years. That was extremely difficult. And when you're waking up every day trying to figure out if that person's going to be there or not the next day, that it wipes you out. And for me, it changed my personality. And this could have been a reason why I became such a stressor, because, every morning it is waking up. I don't know if my dad's going to be here today, going to school. I don't know if he's going to be here when I get home. They had to call the ambulances so much that when I was in high school and I'd hear an ambulance, it was almost like a PTSD reaction. And I'd start freaking out and call my mom, trying to find out if dad was okay. And anyways, so as time went on, he ended up living 10 years. Now, they gave him 6 to 7 years, so 10 was obviously a lot longer than we had expected, which was great. But my wife and I actually, she was pregnant with Haven, our 4-year-old at the time, and she would have been the first grandchild on my side. And we ended up leaving to go do summer sales in Little Rock, Arkansas. We were living in Salt Lake at the time, and both of our families were there. But we left because finances were tight, and summer sales was a good way to go out and just get some money quick. And so we decided to leave, and I didn't really want to leave. We kind of had this feeling we shouldn't leave, but we needed the money. So we just did it. And less than 2 weeks later, my dad died. And I was the only kid not at home. It was 2 months before Haven was born, so we didn't get to meet her, at least on this side. And so at that time, I had spoken to him. I remember spending those 2 weeks, and I was working long days and knocking doors all day. And I had talked to him a couple days before, and because it was close to Father's Day and close to his birthday. And so I told him he loved lottery tickets, scratching lottery tickets for fun. So and in Utah, they're illegal. So I bought him a bunch of lottery ticket scratch offs, and I mailed them. So I sent him off his package, and obviously he never got to open them. But during that time, I realized that anything can change anytime. And I guess you could say I'm extremely paranoid about how I spend my time and how I value my time. But after that experience, I wished I could go back and have, just one more phone call. And so doing what I'm doing, I think about my kids. I have friends who have lost their children, young kids, to cancer or car accidents, whatever it is. And so I think about, for instance, I'm heading to Phoenix tomorrow, and I think about today, if I'm frustrated or upset, what if something happens to me or them when I'm on my trip? And that was it. So, sorry, just valuing that time and realizing anything can happen at any time. And even though that's a lot of energy and effort you got to put in, it's worth it because you don't want to have any regrets. Anyways, you probably weren't ready for any of that. Sorry, I wasn't either. But
no, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I don't think you're paranoid at all. I think you're extra aware, which is a superpower. So that's really awesome to be able to admit and share and help people. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Jake, that's actually what this show is all about. Especially this group here, you don't ever have to apologize about sharing something that's important. And just like Chantel said, and each one of us will tell you, clearly time with our loved ones, we don't want to miss a moment with it, regardless of what we're doing.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you this because, most of us here have suffered some sort of either health consequence or, battled our own inner demons. What's something that you can share with the audience that helps to ground you outside of, the family or your wife or your kids and stuff, but what's something that you've had to figure out along the way that helps to ground you when you hit kind of the bottom and to say, okay, look, I got to either pick myself back up or I got to figure out something to keep going. So what's something that you can share for other audience members that they can try and do for themselves?
And some of you have already heard this, and listeners have probably heard this as well. But for me, that's when minimalism really started impacting my life. Was medication, therapy, just talking it out, exercising, listening to music. Those are all great things, but it got to a point where, I was in such a dark place. I could not figure anything out. And I'm extremely spiritual and religious. And so I would say that's the number one thing over my life that's just kept me at least alive and going. But minimalism really helped me take a step back and realize, what's adding to this? What can I get rid of that's making my life more difficult? What can I get rid of that's making my life, making me upset, making me anxious, making me stressed? What can I get rid of? And for me, that was one of those philosophies and ways of living that improves my situation whenever I kind of take a step back and evaluate what's doing me good and what's not, and then eliminating those things that aren't doing me any good.
Well, Jake, once again, thank you so much on behalf of the co-hosts of the UnLearn Show for giving up some time on a Saturday morning to speak with us.
No,
it's been a real pleasure with just having you here, and thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jake.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Love you. Thanks.